Yeah, had a good chat with him actually.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Pete and I used to be very close friends.
Yeah.
Pete used to ring me up all the time about the cat problems, but when he joined the task force, I got into him about change and colours, and he didn't really accept it really well. Anyway, yeah. I don't care. I'm a bit, I suppose, arrogant in some ways. I don't have to pander to anyone.
No.
I don't have to pander to any of them. I mean, I call it as I see it.
Yep.
And if they don't like it, well, I'm sorry.
Yep.
But I was very disappointed down there with that pack inquiry. You want that screen of that out of the road, probably?
Just for the eye line, yeah. Just sort of.
Yeah. I'll put it down there a bit.
Yeah. If you just
or over there, even if you want it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Just as long as you're looking at me rather than the camera.
I don't want to do an AJ with you. Oh, that's gone off anyway. I probably won't need it.
Yeah.
Most of it's locked up top.
Yeah. All right. Just move just slightly that way.
Left? Yep.
That's just right. Cool. Okay.
Now, what I'm going... You have the facility of editing in this and cutting this.
Yep.
I'm not cutting... As I said, I don't beat around the bush. Mm-hmm. I don't have to pander to anyone. If you ask me a question where there's names involved, I'm going to give you the names.
Yep, that's up to me.
It's up to you. Whether you want to face the recriminations of that, that's your problem.
That's exactly what I was about to say to you.
Yeah. I said it.
Yep.
You're the editor.
Yep. No,
Muppet, he hasn't got any food, so leave him alone.
Yeah. Well, okay, we'll just sort of start just getting a bit of background. Okay, how you personally got so involved in looking at the task force and became a critic of it.
Certainly.
What brought that on?
Back in 95, 96, 97 onwards, right up until about 2004, 5, I was running a large game farm up at near Ben Lomond. We had quite an acreage there. We had pheasants and partridges and brown quail, deer. It was quite a successful commercial operation. We did have one major problem at the time. A lot of our birds, that is pheasants and partridges, etc., were being taken constantly by one predator, feral cats. Massive amount of cost to us. A massive amount of cost in the way of time, chasing the darn things of a night, spotlighting them, trying to remove them from the environment we had all these birds in. I'm the first one to agree that in the cat's view, we probably had a giant McDonald's there. I mean, let's be honest. It was meat on the hoof. But I had a massive problem with this, and of course we used to have a lot of politicians, influential people come there hunting on the game reserve, and I got to know a lot of them and talk to a lot of them and really get down to the nitty-gritty of it. But what sparked me, the main problem I had was, I'm going forward a little bit now, when all this money and all this expenditure was being outlaid on the fox, 201, 202 onwards, I became very resentful of the fact that nothing was being spent on feral cats. There was nothing being spent. The real story is there isn't any money available for feral cats on Tasmanian mainland anyway. There is under the EPBC Act for offshore islands. It satisfies the criteria. So I got very, very indignant about this, and one of the ministers at the time, Brian Green was the minister, he used to come up home, and I mean, I spoke to Brian at it many times, and he professed to me that the foxes were a much bigger problem than the cats. Well, that isn't so. If you look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Ausstats, invasive species, you will see that actually cats threaten more species than foxes.
Is that right?
Yeah, they actually threaten quite a few more bird species. Cats are arboreal. One of the big problems. Cats are arboreal. Foxes are only semi-arboreal. Foxes can sort of climb up sloping pine trees and that. One of their great habits is sleeping in flattened out branches of fir trees. But, I mean, a cat can go vertically up a telegraph pole. Remove a parrot's nest at the top of a telegraph pole. I mean, so in the outback, I've seen them right in the top of telegraph poles. The old abandoned telegraph poles, where a parrot, say, or a galah has built a nest in the hollow top. Cat will go straight up vertical, 50 feet high.
As far as native animal extinction, surely a fox would be more damaging to wipe out a whole population than a cat, because the cats are already here and we've still got the native animals.
It's a debatable point. Foxes are, as I said, not arboreal, but they are very, very good ground hunters. Cats are different. Cats are also very good arboreal hunters. Very good in the trees, cats. That's the reason, and if you wish to check me, check Austat's invasive species. There's a graph there on their website will indicate to you quite clearly that cats actually threaten far more species of birds and mammals than foxes. I remember, just very briefly, I had an old English gamekeeper out here. He was actually a very famous gamekeeper from England, and he was actually running Tony Kennedy's shoot. And I asked him one day about foxes and cats and his statement to me was quite surprising. He said, look, I would rather have 10 foxes on the estate. Now, this is in England. This is not Tasmania. He said, I'd rather have 10 foxes on the estate than one bad feral cat. I said, you're joking. No. The reasons, and then he went on to explain that, cats can go up trees of a night, grab the pheasant by the throat, and actually they define a technique. They actually grab the pheasant by the throat, fall out of the tree, break the pheasant's neck, and take it off and eat it. Oh, I imagine the massive problems. I know the massive problems we had with them. Unbelievable. And so I've never really accepted this. Foxes are the really serious threat. Cats aren't. It's, to me, is absolute nonsense. Mm. I mean, as I said again, check Ausstats if you want to check that out.
Yep. And then the money started flowing in.
Yeah. Well, what happened? I briefly explained the Federal EPBC Act, the key threatening process, and threat abatement plans, etc. What happened after the National Heritage Trust was put in place? There was a lot of money in there. I mean, look, we all know there was about, I believe from memory, it was something like $1.3 billion, and a huge amount of money. Because of the Tasmanian senators, and I was very friendly with one of them, Senator Murphy. Murphy used to come to our property, actually hunting. And he explained to me one day that what this was largely about, and I can quote Shane again. Shane Murphy said to me, look, this is not about foxes or conservation. This is about politics and money. Well, immediately I said, Shane, please explain. And he went through the whole painful episode with me and said, well, this all started with the Federal EPBC Act, the national, with 1/3 sale of Telstra. Bureaucracies were aware that there was a lot of money available. Problem in Tasmania, and I'm being cynical now and I don't mind, I mean, we needed some sort of key threatening process. And under the EPBC Act, if you've got a key threatening process that is threatening only two, no, not more, only two of your endangered species, which may be, in our case, orange-bellied parrot, etc., you can basically put your hand in and prove you've got this key threatening process. You can basically put your hand in a bottomless bit of money. Now, being at the coalface at the game farm, from about 98 onwards, shortly after the fox jumped off the city of Port Melbourne at Burnie Port here on the 31st of May 1998, it's amazing. I started hearing rumours then. I was at the coalface, admittedly. I was hearing rumours from different people that someone had brought fox cubs into the state, that it was being bandied around, and there were all sorts of rumours. Look, I treat them all with a grain of salt, but they were there. I mean, one was that the hunters had done it because it was retribution against the Firearms Act, and in other words, give us our guns back and we'll shoot the foxes, and reprisals. I heard of abalone divers being involved in it, and as a reprisal for being fined huge amounts of money. I mean, there were all sorts of rumours. How much of them had substance? I don't know. I'm not a great believer in rumours. What I do know, however, is that subsequently people were named. Young Rigby, young Bryant, and young Donaldson were named. A few days after, and I'm tracking forward again now to 2001, when Chris Spencer saw a fox cross Illawarra Road. I believe that was the catalyst for all this. I have no doubt what Chris saw. I have no doubt whatsoever. If he saw a fox at 15 metres, he saw a fox at 15 metres. I believe, though, that fox was the same fox that escaped out of a few days previously from a container at Agfest. There were witnesses. There were 8 separate witnesses that saw this fox escape from a machinery container. Now, for a long time afterwards, I'll have to backtrack again there. What happened? That happened on the 15th of May 2001. On the 20th of June 2001, a special police briefing. My good friend, Detective Inspector Michael Otley, led the police investigation. He was answering to Dean was answering to Jack Johnson to McCready to Llewellyn, who was the police minister and the Depeewee minister. Now, on the 20th of June, that briefing was called, and these 3 people were named. There was not a lot of interest shown at first. However, it became apparent that it was getting serious, and I believe even the minister instructed that they up the ante a bit. And 6 detectives, which Michael was responsible, plus Glenn Atkinson from Parks and Wildlife, were put on this special task force to get to the bottom of this. And 6 detectives, we don't even have that many on a murder investigation in Tasmania. And they covered everything. Look, I believe there was phone tapping done. I believe phone records were examined. I believe there was a whole lot of things that were done. And they came up with absolutely no evidence of this importation by these 3 named persons. No evidence at all. The only evidence was that these people actually did exist.
Who was the informant? There were the 3 suspects, but there was also at least 1 or 2 informants.
There were. How this all started, a brother of a well-known Parks and Wildlife employee was discussing over the back of a utility outside Allgoods in Hobart one particular day. There was a bit of a scare going around at the time about dingo crossbreeds with dogs. And this guy had a very dingo-looking crossbred in the back of his utility with a deer shooting sticker on it. And the brother of this Parks and Wildlife employee said, well, I want to watch out, Parks will grab you with that dog, dingo cross, not on. And the conversation got going, and this said person said, well, look, you don't want to worry about, you want to worry about the guys that have brought these foxes in. Which may have been referring to what I said, the gun licensing thing, the abalone thing. I don't know. I believe that's as far as that informant went. From all the information I can glean from several of my close friends. However, that information was passed on to the brother in Parks and Wildlife, which passed it on to believe Nick Mooney and Peter Mooney. It went from there. It absolutely mushroomed from there. Now, these 3 young guys were tested in every possible way. None of those 3 had 1 degree of guilt. Actually, I know a couple of them, and while they're bits of cowboys, they are poachers. One, in fact, I had particular problems with poaching out at Mountain Creek, so I know them, and I have no reason to defend them. I have no reason whatsoever to defend them. But in the fairness of it all, I know they were completely innocent. Those 3 people were not part of that elaborate plan that was put forward, which was considered gospel by the authorities for years. In fact, they still use it today. They still use it. Sometimes, when it's convenient.
Yes.
So, I had great problems with that. The fact that you asked me initially why I took an interest. Well, because of my involvement with the game birds and the game farm. Because bottom line, God, I'm having enough trouble with cats, mate. Foxes are the last thing I want here. So I took a particularly strong interest in it. My very best friend is Graham Otley, who was head of the Regional Fire Brigade in Launceston. His brother is Detective Inspector Michael Utley. Very good friends of theirs. I go shooting with them. I mean, I was getting a lot of information. A lot of information. It doesn't matter now. Michael's retired. They can't hurt him. I mean, I was very aware of what was going on. I was getting updates pretty well frequently. I mean, Graham even run into a Parks and Wildlife employee some years later, and this particular person, and I'll name him, Andrew Napier, Sue Napier's husband, he's dead now, sadly. Him and Sue have both passed on. But I mean, he chastised Graham once for being involved in the anti-brigade. Said, "You don't know what you're talking about." Graham said, I do. My brother led the investigation. So, you know, I mean, as I put in my statement to the PAC inquiry, don't get me wrong, there is an element, a small percentage of truth in all this Fox business. But there's a huge percentage of myth, fabrication, hoaxing, speculation, absolute media paranoia. I mean, I blame the media for this nonsense. I mean, but then again, they only print out or put out what they're told. I mean, it has been ridiculous, some of the stories that have gone into international magazines, for example, like Time Life, National Geographic. I mean, National Geographic have still got up on their website today where this all started by the importation of 19 fox cubs into Tasmania. It's there still today. I can source it for you. I mean, one of the problems and one of the things, and I've said this to the Fox Task Force originally as it was, I've said it again to the Fox Eradication Program, one of your credibility problems, friends, is of your own doing. You've got no one to blame, honestly. If you'd have treated this with absolute reverence, absolute truth from day one, we knew what the problem was, if there was a problem, without all this speculation and paranoia and nuisance. And I don't care. I know I'm on camera and I can say this quite openly. I've traced a lot of this in my time, a lot of this speculation, back to one Nicholas J. Mooney. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. Good, but I mean,
it's okay.
Just keep going.
The phone rang. From where the phone rang. Yep.
So basically, how you got involved?
How I got involved with it all. Yep. I've tried to explain that.
Yep.
I was getting a lot of information firsthand.
Sure.
With this investigation that was going on.
Yep.
And it was quite clear. It was quite clear that the three young previously mentioned people. It became very apparent to me that they were completely innocent. I mean, even in the police letters, which I think you may have witnessed, it was put down. The final analysis was it was down to basically rumour, gossip, innuendo, and bad information.
It was also stated in that the informants were intimidated and they refused to talk once they've been intimidated.
Yes. I'm aware of who several of the informants were. To me, though, that is, and I must be firm on this one, that is classified. I mean, they're not very nice people. I don't want to really mention their name in passing. But I would say that if I was a betting man, I would quite clearly bet on the fact that young Rigby, young Donaldson and young Bryant had no part in any conspiracy or any part in any importation of any fox cubs into Tasmania. What does disturb me, however, the police minister at the time, David Llewellyn, he was fully briefed between the 17th of July 2001, or the 13th of July 2001, and the end of the month, in the chain of command from Detective Inspector Otley to Commander Dean, Deputy Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner McCready, to himself. He was very aware of what the state of play was. Didn't stop him standing up in the Parliament a few weeks later in August, though, and making it inferring quite clearly that, yes, we have a problem. People have bought these cubs in. Yes, I have written to Senator Robert Hill today. Yes, the money's in the mail. I mean, that is in the Hansard of the Parliament. But what is more damning is his comments to the Mercury newspaper on the 5th of June 2002, under the heading of Foxplot. I have it there. where? I mean, it was just blatant. Now, whether this was misconstrued by Michelle Payne, the journalist, I don't know. She is quoting what David Llewellyn said. Now, it was absolutely full of mistruths, and I'm being kind to him. And it went on for years. I mean, at some stage, can I be fair there too? When this first blew up in 2001, when he was police minister, I believe David Llewellyn acted the only way that a minister could have acted at the time, with the information that he was given at the time. But don't you worry, he had time to work out what was going on. I believe it became a source of federal money. We've witnessed this many times. I mean, look, the Macquarie Island incident, I'll just diverse here, just 1 second. I mean, the Macquarie Island incident started off, it was going to cost $7 or $8 million. Then it jumped to 12 million. Overnight it jumped to 24 million. I mean, just because we here say that we're putting in millions of dollars worth of money, whether it's monopoly money or real money, is a different thing. I mean, but there was an absolutely unprecedented flow of federal money coming in for this issue, for the Fox issue.
It was a relatively small amount. That
Well,
was one of the criticisms. If the threat was that serious,
Yeah.
you would have thought they would have hit it with everything rather than at the start. They only had about 6 or 7 people on it. And
Yeah.
then slowly.
Truthfully, yeah. Well, there's a story there too. I mean, when back in the days of Senator Robert Hill in 2001, Robert Hill was talking to David Llewellyn on the phone daily about this problem. He was assured, Senator Hill assured David Llewellyn there was money there. There was money there under the National Heritage Trust scheme, etc. How much do you want? There was a bungled threat abatement plan put in. I believe Sally Bryant, Glenn Atkinson, I believe Nick Mooney, and I believe there was input from Alex Shapp and Alastair Scott as well, into a bungled threat abatement plan. So much it went on for months and months and months. In the meantime, we had an election, and the Senator Hill was replaced by Dr. David Kemp. Dr. David Kemp and David Llewellyn cannot stand one another. They basically can't stand to be in the same room as one another. So much so as Kemp is believed to have said, well, look, you know, here's $400,000, not the 10 million. Now, that's only the figure mooted, I'm not sure of that you asked for. Here's $400,000. Well, when he announced that funding in Hobart, Llewellyn only found out through a journalist that David Kemp, Federal Minister, was actually in Hobart to make the announcement. David Llewellyn was furious. He was absolutely beside himself. He came out and abused. He actually called Kemp's, the federal Liberals, he called them environmental terrorists. He said, all right, if you federal environmental terrorists don't want to go ahead with this, we will stump up Tasmanian Labor money. So it then sort of became political. I mean, well, it was political before that, but that happened to be one of the main catalysts for the beginning of the arguments with the state and the Commonwealth. Now, while you say it was only a small amount of money, in the general scheme of things, with 5 or 6 employees, it probably was. But 2 million here, 3 million there, and of course it escalated as time went on, so much so to the 1st of August 2006, when the famous Glen carcass was discovered. We must touch on that one later.
Yeah, we'll go through them all.
And that, of course, is what we refer to now as the $56 million fox, which was $5.56 million a year from federal and state. So while you say it was only a small amount, in the general scheme of things, yes, it was. But it was a big amount of money when you looked at the base employee per rata, you know. It is not a big amount of money in the overall scheme of things, but for those involved at the time, it was a big amount of money. I'm not sure what the total expenditure is now, but I believe it's somewhere in excess of $36 million. So while we're on that point, it's a lot of money to have spent for not one fox shot, trapped, recovered from poisoning, or even photographed. And this is where the undoing of it all will be. Believe you me, the longer this goes on, the longer it goes on, the harder it's going to get. I liken it to a piece of rope, the hangman's noose. The longer it goes on, the more it hurts when it stops.
Well, let's go through the evidence
we shall.
As they presented. Okay, we start out, we've got the sighting by Chris Spencer.
We'll go back to, I'll be fair there.
Okay.
Let's go back to the 1998 incident, City of Port Melbourne, Burnie docks. Absolutely happened. No risk at all. I've spoken to witnesses that fox was chased around the yard at Burnie. I mean, it was actually filmed, video film. I mean, it happened. I have no doubt with that. I have no problem with that incursion whatsoever. I've always said that on the record. I have no problem with the AgFest 2001 May incursion either. Interestingly enough, it should be made clear at this point that both these incursions were in May. Even if they were vixens, even if they were female foxes, it is absolutely biologically impossible that they were pregnant at the time. Okay, we've cleared that one up.
Well, just with the 98 one, how did it get on the boat?
Well, look, there's rumours flying around that it had assisted passage and all that sort of thing. Look, it was common knowledge over there at that time that the wharfies used to feed the foxes out of their lunch boxes. I mean, they were pet foxes. I mean, some of the wharfies may have been resentful of the poisoning programs that took place afterwards. Maybe they were. I wouldn't like someone poisoning my pet dog either.
Do you think it's a coincidence that it happened on a weekend when the quarantine measures weren't in place?
Possibly. That is a possibility. However, that said, when you've got roll-on, roll-off freight vehicles with a big truck going on one way, a big truck coming off the other, foxes there, it's probably 12 foxes density per square kilometre. Anything's possible. I mean, as I said, the wharfies used to feed foxes there out of their lunch boxes.
Yep.
There is quite a possibility that foxes may have even got into freight. They may have even got into closed containers. I mean, depending on the temperature at the time of the year, whether their survival... I mean, there are rumours that... I haven't substantiated these rumours, but I've heard that there excuse me, have been dead foxes recovered from containers here in Burnie. Can't substantiate it. Excuse me. So I completely... I believe the 201 and the 98 incursion, I have no problem with either of those.
Yeah. The one at AgFest, I don't know much about it. Can you... how much do we know about the...
quite a bit.
From?
It came from Port Melbourne as well. It was in a machinery, or not a completely enclosed machinery container, which was opened on site, and the fox was seen exiting that container, which is only a few kilometres from where Chris Spencer actually sighted it. Just straight over the hill, 5 kilometres basically as the crow flies. 20 minutes stroll for a fox. So I have no problem with that one. I did believe for some time, not believe, but I did suspect maybe for some time that this may have been the fox that Messrs so-and-so shot at Longford and held up. But then it was explained to me afterwards by friends of the said people that no, this was indeed one of the 3 foxes that came across.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Under the seat of Mr. Bosworth's vehicle.
Right. Okay, I've spoken to Mr. Bosworth, who says he's never shot a fox before.
Absolutely, I've got him on the record. I've got him in an interview with a Mercury journalist saying I've shot hundreds of foxes. Do you want to see it?
I've seen it.
Yep.
And okay, and
that was the difficulty. May I just explain there too, while we're on that point, and it's still fresh in our minds, that Eric Jeffrey Bosworth and his mate Scotty Jeeves, at a range of 55 to 60 metres, on the said night that they shot that fox, and said they couldn't identify what they were shooting at, is absolute nonsense. Through a good quality 4-power telescopic sight, on top of a Bruno 22 Magnum, illuminated by a 100-watt spotlight, I've said this before, you would have been able to count the whiskers on the fox's face. There is no doubt in my mind that they, if that event was true, that they knew exactly what they shot at. I don't, for 1 second, believe that it happened there. I don't believe that fox was even shot with a 22 Magnum, of which was submitted. That, having seen the pathology reports and my background experience with firearms, which is extensive, I believe that that was shot with a very, very high velocity 222 calibre, like either a 22-50 or maybe even like a 225 Winchester or 220 Swift, like a 3,800, 4,000 feet per second, not an 1,800 feet per second 22 Winchester Magnum. You just can't get the explosive effect with a 22 Winchester rimfire. Sorry, it just doesn't happen. There was not enough. Senator Murphy got the pathology reports and the ballistic reports for me. I looked at them. I've got them actually, and there was no way in the world that fox was shot with a 22 Winchester rimfire Magnum. I will stake my life on it. That was shot with a very, very high velocity centerfire. So much so, there was no bullet fragments at all which were of any use to ballistics to identify the rifling marks from whichever firearm it was fired from. Now, how do you explain that? I mean, while Bosworth is very, very smart, I don't believe he was smart enough to know that he wouldn't have X-rated himself. I don't believe he was smart enough to know that there wouldn't be any particles of bullet recovered. That's a little problem that I have with that issue. But I state again, I firmly believe that fox that was submitted as being shot on Yule's property was not shot on Yule's property at all, and it certainly was not shot with a 22 Winchester rimfire Magnum. Next.
How did you come across the information that he brought foxes over?
I had a group of friends. I was very heavily involved in Northern Midlands Gun Club at the time. A guy there who would back me up on this statement, a fellow who by the name of Ken Triffett. He lives up near Deloraine there somewhere. Ken was president of the Northern Midlands Gun Club at the time. In his company, Bosworth made the statement to several people that this fox was not shot there. It was brought in from Geelong in Victoria. Ken Triffett swears and declares to this day Geelong was the original home of this fox.
Was that said in the presence of anyone else?
Yes, several others. And Triffett will back that statement up.
Yeah.
The point there, the difficulty there that I have with the statement of Bosworth is, he had a motive, and it was $5,000. There was a reward going around at the time of $5,000. It was published in several of the hunting magazines. What I have also great difficulty with that is that these ads were cut out of the said hunting magazines and posted in Melbourne gun shop windows. Now, that all becomes very strange to me. Why would you, if you were looking for a Tasmanian fox, why would you be posting ads for rewards in Melbourne gun shop windows? My thoughts is it was bait. Someone, and I'm not going to say who I believe that someone was, planted it as bait, and Bosworth actually took the bait. My belief is Bosworth knew about this reward from colleagues of his in Melbourne long before he went to Melbourne or to Geelong and shot those said 3 foxes. Now, I'm making pretty serious allegations here. I don't mind, because, as I said, I have witnesses that were with me at the time that will back up these statements. So, but the broad consensus of all this is, I don't believe that fox was shot in Tasmania. There's a huge problem there for the Depeewee too, by the way, in that it was supposed to have contained a rare endemic long-tailed mouse, Pseudomus higginsii. It's not found anywhere in that area. I think 60, 70 kilometres as the crow flies is the closest that particular mammal is found. Huge problems there all round. The fact that this was supposed to have been recovered from the gut contents of this animal at that location. It was done too by two non-pathologists. I mean, lads at the time just threw the body to Chris Imms and Nick Mooney and said, look, it's past what I'm going to do anything with. I'm sure that our friend Mr. Hall would have explained to you that there was huge problems, that there was larva wasn't taken from blowflies and all the sorts of things that didn't happen, that should have happened. To me, I think, to be precise, it was convenient evidence at the time. Next.
You said that Bosworth was one of the people in the photo under the Longford sign.
I have. I'm aware of the other person's name as well.
His name is?
His name is Jody Viney. Viney, yep. Right. Lives down on the Canara turnoff, on the St Mary's, St Helens turnoff, on the opposite side. Well, he did last time I know him.
And how do you know
Changed one of his very, very best friends. They had a bit of a tiff. One of his shooting buddies, in the presence of about 6 other people, named him quite clearly. I named him in camera at the PAC inquiry. Changed in stature though. A very tall, thin boy in those days, 2001. Quite a lot, put on a lot of weight now, haven't we all? He's quite a bit heavier, quite a different. You wouldn't even guess him as the same bloke, actually. Yeah, but once again, I mean, I can name people that named him to me as it being absolute, no chance of it not being correct, absolutely correct. Now, that to me presents all sorts of problems, because why then did they leave it for, well, that was, okay, that was July, oh yeah, August, September. It was only about 6 weeks, wasn't it, when the Bosworth shooting was supposed to have taken place. Freezers are good things. Yeah. I suspect that fox was frozen, the one that was supposed to have turned up down at Yule's property, for a long time. I'm making accusations here. Yeah. What you do with it, Simon, is entirely up to you.
Oh,
I'm prepared to stand up and repeat it under sworn evidence in court.
Yep.
What I know.
I was told that one of the guys in that photo was in fact a guy that lives just outside Epping Forest and has deer there, and he's since passed on. His name is...
Russell? Randall Russell?
No, Riley. He was a deer shooter that lived there. He has passed on a couple of years ago. Yeah, I can't think what his name is now.
Was it Eric Riley? No?
Riley, yeah, he was an old guy. And his sons, I know this fact, his sons wore camo gear when they carried his coffin into the church.
It's a new one to me.
Yeah.
I know the tall, thin guy on the left-hand side of the photo. I have the photo there. Was Jody Viney. I was assured by the same accomplice that dobbed in Viney that it was Eric Jeffrey Bosworth on the other side. Now, they may all be linked together, Riley. I mean, at one stage, they were trying to put Randall Russell, well-known poacher from down the Midlands, who is friends with Viney, they were trying to put him in the frame. I know for a fact it wasn't Randall Russell. I believe, if I was to take an educated guess, I believe it was one Eric Jeffrey Bosworth. It's even Bosworth's stature. I mean, the jumper he's got on in that photo, I've seen him wearing in other photos of Eric Bosworth. I mean, sure, there's plenty of jumpers made. I mean, that's not a real good indicator, but it's just another clue there. I have no reason to doubt it. I have no reason. If I did, I'd quite openly state it to you.
Sure. The next one, I suppose, well, apart from the St Helens, the skin that was sent into the office.
Well, that was the fox that was photographed under the C149 Longford sign. That was the skin from that fox. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, 100%.
And you know this through... And you know this how?
Ah, through the same informants of Viney.
Oh.
Yeah.
Moving on to 2003, The Fox in the Box.
Oh dear, now we have a problem. Yeah, I gave evidence on this at the PAC inquiry too. I believe that fox was killed on board a vessel and was put there outside the port gates to deliberately deceive, in the fact that the port didn't want the disruption again of the original 98 absolute fiasco. And it was a fiasco. Every man and his dog come up from Hobart, Parks to Pewee. I think they spent, the local pub was something like $120,000 the beneficiary of it all. Anyway, yeah, I have huge problems with that one. The fact that, according to the pathologist's report again, which David Obendorf and I obtained, it hadn't eaten for some 6 or 7 days. That suggests to me it was contained. There were later on some reports that it had small fragments of rattus in it, or a few hairs or something. I mean, look, I'm not a pathologist. I don't want to go down that road. What I do know is that that fox's stomach was, small intestine, large intestine, was completely empty. It had not eaten for 6 or 7 days. It had not bred, yet it was a vixen 2-year-old, which had ovulated possibly 2, maybe even 3 times, but at least twice. That's identifiable by the scarring, on the reproductive organs of that fox. It had never bred, which once again suggests to me that that fox was contained somewhere for a long time. Or it was a fox that had been here in Burnie for a long, long time, which hadn't had a mate to breed with. A very lonely spinster fox. I don't accept that, though. That is the other explanation. I believe that fox was killed on board and was dumped outside, well outside the port gates, to avoid any shutdown of the ports again. Now, there are some terrible stories floating around that there were several. You've been talking to one of them in the last couple of days. There were several people going backwards and forwards on those brambles and toll ships doing a risk assessment. Are you aware of that?
Mm-hmm.
You know who they are?
Mm-hmm.
Has he admitted that to you?
No.
He won't admit it?
No.
Why?
Well, because he doesn't think it's true.
Fair enough. I wanted that exact answer from you. But we can prove there were people from the Depewee going backwards and forwards.
I have heard that. Yeah, exactly what they were doing, I'm not sure.
Doing a risk assessment on the possibility of foxes getting on board and off boats. Mm-hmm. That's what the risk assessment was done. Yeah. Okay. There were rumours that several people, one included, was Mr. Bloomfield. There were rumours. I mean, once again, that's rumours. I mean, I wasn't standing behind him with a video camera watching him walk on and off the boat. I don't know. I don't really put... While sometimes rumours can lead to certain conclusions, I really don't put a lot of faith in them. If I believed every rumour that I've heard over this fox issue, I mean, I'd be a walking encyclopedia. That's interesting too. Over the years, I don't know why, but I've sort of become this conduit for information. I have people email me out of the blue, ring me out of the blue. I take it all on its... Most of it I take with a grain of salt, to be honest. So anyway, yeah, I have no doubt that in my mind, I'm clear, that fox was killed on board a vessel and dumped outside the port gates. For whatever reason, whatever motive, I know. What I know it did do was kickstart all the funding again, because the Fox Task Force was about to be shut down completely in 2003. And yet this kick-started it all again. So that's 2003 covered.
There seems to be a bit of a pattern there. I was actually going to...
With the Fox Carcass finding refunding, there is a pattern. If you look at the chronological series of events, it's there everywhere, clear.
I'm actually going back past there to get some footage. That's just outside where the big Ford sign is.
It's no. It's outside, just along past the old hospital. Right. You go past the Burnie Port gates. And there's a little. It was actually outside at the time. It was Burnie Mitsubishi.
Mitsubishi. Right.
Yeah, okay. But it's 100 metres this side of the Motors organisation there.
Okay.
Motors. On the right-hand side going out of town, 100 metres back towards the port is exactly... I can tell you the guy who found it. Oh, he was full forward for the Burnie Dockers. A guy by the name of Brad Davis. Right. He was the cyclist that found it.
Yep.
He reported it to the police by phone. The coppers come down there, didn't do any photographs, just scooped the whole thing up,
put it in a box,
took off. Yeah. The fox in the box.
And Lilico Beach, I've just been down there to have a look.
Yep. I have great difficulty with that one. Ivan Dean may even be able to explain this to you probably more intricately than I can. That was supposed to have first been seen by a cyclist from Canberra, in inverted commas, on Christmas Day 2005. However, she didn't report it till the 23rd of February 2006 when she went back to Canberra and supposedly had explained by some friends of hers, oh, you should report it, there are no foxes in Tasmania. Well, I have great difficulty with that too. She was a cyclist. She cycled all around Tasmania. Didn't she see any of those fox-free signs? Those big green foxes.
I think they were back then, were they?
Yes.
They were?
Yes. Okay. Yes, they were.
I thought they were quite recent.
No.
I just got off the Spirit and there's absolutely nothing about foxes on that.
No.
It's amazing. I was quite surprised by it.
It's amazing. Which leads me to the 2003 incident, of which has been a catalyst for this now admission that we do need permits to bring in bits and pieces of foxes in.
Well, just on the Lilico one, I also spoke this morning to John Coombs.
Yep.
Who said that he saw it on the 19th of December.
Oh, yeah, Raspberry, yeah. He used to operate under the pseudonym Raspberry on Tasmanian Tire.
Oh, that was
Yep.
Yeah, and
John Coombs.
Yeah, he said it was there for quite some time.
I find that absolutely amazing that no one bothered to report it. He said he made an entry in the Friends of Lilico Penguins book that he saw a foxy-looking puppy. That's the exact entry. And yet, when questioned at the pack inquiry, Nick Mooney said, oh, no such thing happened. John Coombs didn't make an entry. John Coombs, he only said they saw a puppy, not a foxy-looking puppy. So, but that story has changed. You realise that story has changed.
I know Nick says now that it was
shot somewhere else.
But that's still unsubstantiated.
Well, they have an anonymous letter. One of the big problems I have with this whole fox issue is a huge percentage of it is anonymous.